The sun had not yet risen over the dusty hills of eastern Afghanistan, but the heat was already promising to be brutal. Inside a cramped forward operating base, a team of 12 Navy SEALs was gearing up for a high-stakes mission. Their target was a remote village suspected of housing a high-value terrorist leader. The atmosphere was tense but familiar. As they checked their rifles and secured their night vision goggles, their commanding officer, Lieutenant Harris, gave them a surprising piece of news. They would not be going alone. A special asset was being assigned to their unit for this operation. The SEALs, big men with hardened faces, looked up as a small figure walked into the hangar. It was a young girl, no older than 15, with sharp, intelligent eyes and a sniper rifle slung across her back that looked almost as big as she was. She introduced herself simply as Layla. A low chuckle ran through the group. One of the largest SEALs, a man named Russo, whispered loudly enough for everyone to hear, "She's only 15. What is she? A lost schoolgirl?" Another added a sarcastic comment about needing a babysitter. Lieutenant Harris immediately silenced them with a glare, explaining that Layla was a local militia-trained marksman who knew the terrain better than any map. Despite the officer's words, the SEALs exchanged doubtful glances. To them, she looked like a child playing soldier. Layla said nothing. She did not smile or frown. She simply loaded her rifle with calm, practiced movements, and stared at the horizon. Her silence was louder than their mocking. The mission began with a helicopter insertion just before dawn. The SEALs moved out in a tight formation, sweeping through the rocky terrain toward the village. Layla walked a few steps behind the main group, her eyes constantly scanning the ridges and windows. The men ignored her, treating her more like a piece of luggage than a fellow operative. Russo, still amused, handed her a heavy ammunition box, joking that she should earn her keep. Layla carried it without complaint, her small arms straining, but never faltering. They reached the outskirts of the village and began their search. For the first hour, everything went according to plan. They cleared 3 buildings and found nothing but sleeping families and livestock. The SEALs started to relax, believing the intelligence was bad. That was when the world exploded. A rocket-propelled grenade screamed out from a hidden bunker on a hilltop, slamming into a stone wall just 10 feet from the team. The blast threw 2 SEALs to the ground, shrapnel cutting through the air. Before anyone could react, heavy machine gun fire rained down from 3 different positions. The team was trapped in a kill zone. Lieutenant Harris yelled for everyone to take cover behind a low wall. Russo returned fire, but the enemy had the high ground and the advantage. Bullets chipped away at their cover, and the SEALs realized they were pinned down with no easy escape route. Their radio operator tried to call for backup, but the enemy had jammed their signal. For the first time, genuine fear flashed across the faces of these elite warriors. They were outnumbered and outmaneuvered, and the terrorists were closing in in the chaos of screaming men and exploding dirt. No one noticed Layla had vanished. One moment she was behind the wall, and the next, she was gone. Russo cursed, thinking the girl had run away in fear. "I told you she was useless," he shouted over the gunfire. But Lieutenant Harris pointed up the eastern slope. There, moving like a ghost between the rocks, was the young sniper. She had not run away. She had circled around the enemy's flank. While the SEALs drew the terrorists' attention with their loud return fire, Layla climbed a steep, rocky outcrop that the militants had considered impassable. From her new perch, 100 meters above the main battle, she had a perfect view of the 3 machine gun nests. Her breathing slowed. The world narrowed to a single circle in her scope. She saw the first terrorist, a bearded man in a black turban, laughing as he sprayed bullets at the trapped Americans. Layla's finger squeezed the trigger. The crack of her rifle echoed across the valley, distinct from the deeper sounds of the SEALs' weapons. The laughing man's head snapped back, and he fell silent forever. The second gunner, confused, turned to look at his fallen comrade. Before he could raise his own weapon, a second shot found him. The third nest realized they were under sniper fire and tried to relocate. But Layla was already tracking them. Her third shot punched through the wall of their position, hitting the ammunition box. The resulting explosion killed 2 more terrorists instantly. Down below, the SEALs watched in stunned disbelief. The heavy gunfire that had been pinning them down was ceasing, 1 position at a time. "Who is taking those shots?" Russo asked, his voice full of wonder. Lieutenant Harris pointed again, and the team saw the small silhouette on the ridge, calmly reloading her bolt-action rifle. The mocking was gone. In its place was a raw, humbled respect. But the battle was far from over. The terrorists, realizing they were being picked off from above, abandoned their nests and tried to rush the SEALs' position directly. 15 armed men poured out of a hidden tunnel, screaming and firing wildly. They hoped to overwhelm the Americans with sheer numbers. The SEALs braced for a brutal close-quarters fight. But before the charging terrorists could cover 50 meters, Layla shifted her aim. She did not panic. She did not spray bullets. Every shot was deliberate, surgical, and deadly. She targeted the leaders first, dropping the men shouting orders. Then she picked off the ones carrying rocket launchers. The charge began to falter. Men turned to run, but there was nowhere to hide from the eyes on the hill. One by one, Layla continued her grim work. The SEALs added their own fire, but it was the sniper's precision that broke the enemy's spirit. When the dust finally settled, 12 terrorist bodies lay scattered across the rocky ground. The rest had fled into the mountains, their ambush shattered. Silence fell over the battlefield, broken only by the ringing in everyone's ears and the soft moan of a wounded SEAL. Lieutenant Harris took a head count. Miraculously, no one from his team had been killed. 2 men had minor shrapnel wounds, but they were alive. They owed their lives to a 15-year-old girl they had mocked an hour earlier. Layla descended from her perch, her face smeared with dust and her expression still unreadable. She walked up to Russo, who was sitting behind the wall, staring at the ground. He could not meet her eyes. She knelt beside him and quietly said, "Your suppressive fire kept their heads down. I could not have done it without you." It was a graceful lie to save his pride, and everyone knew it. Russo finally looked up. His eyes were wet, not from dust. He extended a large, trembling hand. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice breaking. "I was wrong about you. You saved us all." Layla shook his hand firmly. There was no anger in her grip, only the quiet strength of someone who had seen too much violence to hold grudges. The other SEALs gathered around, their earlier arrogance replaced by a solemn, brotherly silence. They helped her carry her gear, offered her their water, and treated her like the most valuable member of the team. The helicopter arrived an hour later. As they lifted off, the men looked down at the village and then at the young girl sitting among them. They knew they had witnessed something extraordinary. Back at the base, the story spread like wildfire. Commanding officers who had doubted the decision to send a teenager into combat requested a full debriefing. Intelligence officers analyzed Layla's shots, noting that 3 of them had been taken from over 800 meters, a feat that would challenge even the most experienced military snipers. The SEALs wrote a formal commendation, recommending her for the highest civilian honor their country could offer a foreign national. But when the officers came to congratulate her, Layla simply asked for a blanket and a place to sleep. The adrenaline had worn off, and she looked every bit her 15 years again, small, tired, and young. The next morning, Lieutenant Harris found her sitting alone on the base's rooftop, watching the sunrise. He sat beside her and asked the question everyone wanted to ask. "How did you learn to do that?" Layla was quiet for a long time. Then she told him that 2 years ago, terrorists had attacked her own village. They had killed her father and her older brother, who had been teaching her to shoot for sport. She had picked up her brother's rifle the next day and vowed to never let such evil roam free again. She had no formal training, only grief and a natural talent that grew sharper with every life she was forced to take. The lieutenant said nothing. He simply placed a hand on her shoulder. A week later, the SEALs prepared to leave for their next mission. Layla stayed behind, as her duty was to her own people. As the helicopters took off, Russo leaned out of the open door. He cupped his hands around his mouth and yelled across the tarmac, "Hey, Layla, when you turn 18, come find us. We'll make a SEAL out of you." For the first time since they had met her, Layla smiled. It was a small, sad smile, but it was real. She waved once, then turned and walked back toward the hills, her rifle on her shoulder, ready to protect her home once more. The SEALs watched until she disappeared into the dust. None of them ever forgot the 15-year-old girl who taught them that courage has no age and heroes come in the smallest packages.